to this gathering today. So I am Patricia Duguay, and I work in the Central Alumni Office at the University of Waterloo in Waterloo, obviously. I've been working from home these last weeks, like so many others. Along with being a proud alumnus, I have worked in the Office of Advancement for almost 19 years, working to keep alumni engaged and interested and connected to the University of Waterloo. As we begin today, I would like to acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on either side of the Grand River. So a little bit of housekeeping here. I want to encourage all of the people connected in today to participate in the survey that you will receive after the series concludes. Next week, this is a series of 3. After the 3rd series, we'll be sending out a survey. We would very much like to know what kind of programming you would like to see from us during this unprecedented time. And how can we help you make the most of your time? Is there something specific you want to hear about or that we can provide for you that would help you during this? We'd love to hear about it. So look for that survey, and we'd love to hear from you. After the presentation is completed, we are going to open the floor to any questions that you may have. So when we invite you to ask questions, or actually at any time during the presentation, you'll see, if you hover your mouse, you'll see a chat bubble. And if you open that up, there is a box called Q&A that you can type your questions into. And we'll be monitoring that, and we will get through those as soon as possible. We'll get through those at the end of the presentation. If you prefer to speak in person, we also have the ability to turn on your microphone and have you ask Jason and Debbie your question voice to voice. So right now I'm going to introduce our speakers, the people that you're here to hear, joined so that you can hear. I'm happy to introduce Fung, who is a graduate with a BES in 2006, and Jason Liu, who graduated with a Bachelor of Science in 2005. They are the co-founders of the organization known as Yoga Tree. And I guess it all started in 2007 with the launch of the very first Yoga Tree in Thornhill. The phenomenal growth of this venture has been well documented by Canadian Business and Profit magazine. Yoga Tree has won the ranking of one of Canada's fastest growing companies for 3 years in a row now. In Profit's annual W100 list, Debbie has been named as one of Canada's top 100 female entrepreneurs. We're so proud of her. As well, in 2016, Debbie, you were a recipient of Canada's Next Top Entrepreneur Award. You're also active in the Toronto community supporting female entrepreneurship and startups. Jason has developed a specialized training for aspiring yoga instructors, which he personally trains himself. And he's known for his ability to push students to reach their potential, which is what all of us need in our life sometimes. So we're so very happy to have both of you with us today to discuss something that many of us are having to consider very carefully right now, and that is our personal health and wellness. Take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Carlos and Meg. It is a great opportunity to be back virtually and speak to all of you. Today, Jason and I are going to talk a bit more about how do we really take care of health and mental wellness. More than ever, especially in COVID times, this is something that we're all working with.
Adoption.
So I'll let Jason take it away. So 2007 was when we first started Yoga Tree. We started in the heart of Thornhill. That was when we graduated from University of Waterloo. We secured a full-time position, but we took a leap of faith and we actually went to India and studied traditional classical hatha. Jason studied that in Mysore, India, and I went north to study yoga in Jaipur, India. When we came back, we opened a very first studio in Thornhill. Fast forward 13 years.
13 years ago.
We now have 5 studios across Toronto, at Bay Dundas, Yonge and Eglinton, Richmond, Spadina, Richmond Hill, and Vaughan. On March the 15th, it was also a day that we were supposed to break the grounds at our 6th studio in the heart of Yorkville. But on the same day, we actually closed our studio because of COVID-19. So things changed and we're adapting. And this is us. This is us now together.
And this webinar series couldn't have come at a better time. I think health and wellness is at the top of everyone's mind. And just understanding how both can kind of work together and how they depend on each other to create that healthy body, healthy mind. And you can't really separate the two. I think that's the important distinction there. Someone could be super active and have, the 6-pack and the huge muscles and, can run the marathon, and you could be the most stressed out person. Whereas someone could be super zen, super calm, carefree, stress-free, and have all the aches and pains of a deteriorating body. So you can't have one without the other. And I think today we're just joining those two ideas together and see how one needs both and what we can do. So I think to start it off is, why do we want to feel a certain way, or how would you define a healthy mind? And in order to kind of be motivated to do something, you kind of have to know what you're moving away from. When you're not in the right mindset, you often feel groggy, or your thought processes are clouded. Your response time is a lot slower, whereas if you have a healthy mind, you know exactly what you want. It's laser-like focus. And then we have the other point of, I wrote down awareness, but this is more in the sense of self-awareness versus not understanding what's happening in the world, or just being oblivious to what's around you, or what you're doing to yourself. And then there's the whole point of inspiring your mind, how to recharge, how to energize, versus someone who's lethargic, not motivated, someone, I'm not going to speak to myself, but watching too much Netflix, finding ways to kind of, lift your spirits up, and, that healthy mindset, I would say. So to create that clear focus, there's some, I should backtrack a little bit. It's not a clear linear path. Think of creating that healthy mind and healthy body as multitasking different activities that you can do. They all will help each other, and you don't have to follow, step 1, step 2, step 3, but definitely one of the big elements is getting a good night's rest. A lot of people can say, I function off of 5 hours or function off of 6 hours. And yes, you could physically function off of that little amount of sleep, but it is proven that, even just an hour of sleep less than your normal starts to affect your mental abilities. You're a little bit more irritable. You're a little bit more groggy. And there is a connection with your immune response as well too, and especially during this time, you want to keep your immunity up. So it is recommended that most adults have 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and not just the amount of sleep, but the quality of sleep, and I think the timing as well too. Think of the time where you went on a long plane ride and you woke up on the other side of the world, and internally your clock is set to daytime, and in Asia or in Japan, it's nighttime, and your whole body system is turned upside down. And even now, like if you're sleeping in during this COVID time, everything is going to get reset and your body's trying to adapt. So try to keep normal sleep times, wake times, to keep that rhythm in your internal system kind of regulated. And also we wanted to touch upon the point of quality sleep, the amount of deep sleep that you're getting. Certain things that you can avoid before sleeping, such as being too overly active an hour before bedtime. Like you're not going to go for a nighttime jog and then try to hit the sack right away. Or alcohol consumption or nicotine just before bed, or too much fluids can also affect your deep sleep. And deep sleep is so important to try to reset your biological processes and cleanses the mind before the next day. Staying hydrated, you need water for all the bodily processes. Just as much as we stay active, we also have to flush out our toxins and our waste as well too. And it just keeps the brain and the heart healthy. And it's one of those important building blocks, and you need to have that before you can really focus on what to do. You need to have that foundation first. Reflecting on your internal status, your physical work environment is also so important. So for me, sometimes before I start my day, I'll just make sure everything is tidy, my work area is tidy, the house is in good order, and I feel that I'm physically now ready to dive into the mental activity that I'm about to do. So just making sure that that physical environment matches that internal environment. Keeping that clear mind, then you have to think about, I have that foundation, what do I do now? How to elevate from where I am now to where I want to be. And I think a big part of that is finding and kind of developing your hobbies. A hobby I would define as something that kind of sucks up all your energy and all your time, and you get engulfed in it. I'm not saying it's the one thing that you're addicted to. Now, addiction is something different than hobbies, but a hobby is something that is going to elevate your mood. You feel good doing it. For me, I have a few different hobbies. Maybe I'll share with you guys after. But it's definitely something that everyone needs to find. And I think right now, where we have so much time at home, to think about, what are our personal interests. And even though we're inside, we can still find some hobbies. It could be listening to music. It could be drawing or doodling. It could be art. It could be music. It could be crafting. It could be woodworking. So finding something that really, ignites that fire from within. Maybe, digging down into the archives. What did you used to like to do that you want to, start again? Awareness. And this is where sometimes it overlaps. I find this is one of the big reasons why I got sucked into yoga. Yes, there was a physical aspect of it. Actually, it was Debbie that got me hooked into yoga. I started because of a tear in my pec minor, which changed the way that I set my shoulder, and I would just get sharp pains down that whole right side. And once the body felt better with some movement and some range of motion, then I started to realize the benefits of yoga in terms of self-awareness, and awareness of self-awareness. I think started on the yoga mat. When you're holding that warrior one, you realize what your arm is doing, how your foot is grounding into the mat, what your spine is doing in that particular moment. And instead of all these thought bubbles thinking about what I need to cook for dinner, what I need to do next week, or the stupid thing that I said last week to my friend, your thought processes all get zoned in, and they're just thinking about your arm, your foot, your spine. And it just draws that awareness and that focus. And oftentimes I'll talk to my students about how focus and mental clarity is almost like a muscle. Building that sense of awareness is like a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger that muscle gets. It's kind of like building your brain. And as you become more aware of yourself and your thought processes, you start to realize that before anything happens in your life, before you move, before you have your habitual behaviors or your habits or your tics, all those things that happen, I guess, physically, start mentally. And if you can catch yourself sending that thought to that habit that you were about to do, or that, the habit of snacking all the time, or the habit of whatever it may be. We all have our indulgences. We, take a pause, and it could be 2 seconds, but we think to ourselves, is that serving me now? Was that helpful at one point of time, but maybe not now? And you start to take control. And I think a lot of anxiety is the feeling of loss of sense of control. And that self-awareness can help bring some of that control back. And that's, I think, one of the things that has helped me mentally. And that's why I keep going back to yoga, I would say. Um, so definitely build that sense of awareness. Start to look at some of the thoughts that get sent out before they actually manifest into the world, and take it from there. So once you have your, I would say, body or your mind in check, how does the body get into this? And I said, you could be the most Zen-like person, but be deteriorating inside. You could have, back pain, neck pain, from sitting so much, working at home. And what we can do to really make ourselves feel better physically. Looking at our body, anatomically, every joint should have the range of motion that it should be. So your shoulder, you should be able to kind of move your elbows in huge circles, reach your arms up overhead without that pain and suffering. So just increasing that range of motion and getting that circulation. Circulation and blood flow is really the key to helping to repair injuries in the body. So it doesn't have to be anything too strenuous, but walking, moving, doing something that you love, you can combine those two together. And also the notion of being strong and flexible. So not only lifting weights or doing 100 push-ups for an Instagram challenge or whatnot. You're doing this for yourself so that you have the ability to carry yourself without pain, having proper posture, being able to sit in a chair and not feel that ache in the lower back. Just finding that range of motion and having that balance so you could be strong and flexible at the same time and not have one without the other. Food and nutrition. I'm not a nutritionist, but definitely being mindful of what you consume and how you're feeding your body, because your body can only be as strong or as healthy as what it takes in. So just being mindful of what is going into your system. If you're looking at whole foods, consuming non-processed foods, and just being mindful of when you're taking up that food. So having set breakfast, lunch, dinner time instead of eating sporadically, your body actually is more programmed to absorb more evenly, and also it helps to kind of set those certain rhythms that we talked about earlier as well. And it's so important to have that connection in terms of what you're consuming and how you're consuming it as well too. We can look at making sure that you have your vitamins, all your macros, as well as micronutrients as well too, and just balancing that in with your physical regime, your fitness regime, and taking care of the body in that sense. So it's more of a holistic approach instead of let's do this and then this and then this. Let's look at the bigger picture as a whole and build ourselves into that new state, that healthy mind, healthy body. Going back into the range of motion, we really want to lubricate the joints in the body and making sure that you have that the ability to move, and also complementing that with your muscle tone and your flexibility. And I think yoga really draws those aspects together of body and mind together. yoga can range from, something very physical. You could do headstands and handstands, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that one sole point of view. We have things like restorative yoga or yin yoga, which would focus more on flexibility or more on the meditative side of that whole equation. And I think it's important to find what drives you, what suits your kind of personality in terms of, what ticks all the boxes of what your body is craving for. And as you find these blocks and you build yourself as a whole, hopefully you start to feel better. And I think it's just a process and a lot of experimenting that we go through. So definitely think of healthy mind, healthy body as one whole equation and not to ignore one or the other. So I think there were questions that Pat had for me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jason. So much of what you said really resonated with me, and I hope for our guests that are tuning in, it touched base, it resonated with them as well. I have a couple of questions I wouldn't mind posing at you, and then we'll see if there's any that have been submitted by viewers. So you talked a little bit about the importance of a good night's sleep. Do you have any tools that you use or any apps that you can recommend for us to help get a good sleep?
Yeah, there's an app called Calm, and I think it's not specifically to help with sleep, but it definitely helps you to get into that state of mind, relaxing your mental processes before you wind down. Just a simple 5-10 minute of mindful breathing, of body awareness or a body scan, or some gentle music just to kind of calm the nerves down. And a lot of studies have been saying that you shouldn't be doing much activity in your bed opposed to just sleeping in your bed. So you shouldn't be using your bed to watch TV, as that kind of mental link is there too. Also doing a little bit of gentle stretching or yoga that's relaxing before sleeping. But one of my favorite apps specifically would be the app on my Fitbit. And I think for the Apple users, you have that on your Apple Watch as well too. But it not only tracks your sleep, but it tracks the quality of your sleep. So how many times you've woken up at night, and how long you've stayed in that deep sleep. And the REM cycles and that deep sleep is really when your body gets that chance to recharge itself. So comparing that night to night, it also helps to see how many hours you've had per day. So it kind of gives that tracking that you're looking for, so that you can see that there is some progress, and then you can kind of compare that to how you feel during that day. Did that deep sleep make a difference to my performance for that day? And I think that's been a really useful app for myself. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Just one other question before we take a couple from the audience. You have mentioned that hobbies can be helpful to help recharge our mind's batteries. What hobbies do you have that help you to recharge? And how does one go about finding a hobby if they just are really not connected with that part of their thinking in these busy times?
Yeah. After graduating from Waterloo, and I graduated with a Bachelor of Science, Biomedical Sciences, and yoga was not something that I considered taking into a full-time career. I was actually working with a life coach, and I was doing a lot of self-discovery as well. And my life coach was encouraging me to just do what I love to do. Doesn't have to have any ties financially or responsibilities, just what are my interests. And for me, it was a very hard question because I was so driven, this is what I wanted to do. And what do you mean, what are my hobbies? What do you mean, what do I like? I love to study. I love to research. And And my life coach is, no, something that you love to do. And at that time, I just discovered yoga. And she's like, why don't you do more yoga? And I was like, but that's not something that, you know, could be a career. And she's like, don't think of it as a career. Don't think of it as anything. And I think the hobby should be viewed in that light. It shouldn't have any, significance financially or a responsibility or what people would think about you. It's something that you like to do genuinely for yourself. It could be sewing, it could be knitting, it could be something tied into physical. So a lot of my friends, they love to run, they run marathons, and they like to tie that physical activity, that rhythm, so that as they're running, they're not thinking of anything. And the true definition of a hobby for me, I think, is when you are so engulfed in what you do, you don't care what is happening before or after your activity. You've kind of taken that time to recharge yourself, and it's about you time. For me, I've kind of taken up to the hobby of gardening, not really gardening outside, but plants. Um, Between my wife and I, Debbie was saying that I should stop collecting more plants because almost over 80, 90 plants. And I actually use the studios to babysit some of the plants that I can't keep at home. But when I'm in my, looking at my plants or taking care of my plants, I'm making sure they have the right nutrients. I'm preparing them to grow for the next season. I'm repotting them. I'm moving them to the best window, trying to understand what their likes and dislikes are. So for me, that just takes me out of my worries for the day, and that helps me recharge. So definitely try to find something that it's your fire, I would say. Yeah.
Perfect. That's great. And that's actually a really good segue to a question that one of our listeners has posed. Asking if you have any suggestions about how to go for a run during this time when we need to be thinking about social distancing. A lot of people are in more dense areas where you can't necessarily space yourself out as much as you might like. Do you have any suggestions for how to get that sort of outdoor exercise opportunity and still remain socially distant?
There's definitely opportunities to exercise indoors and outdoors, but definitely outdoors it is a little bit more challenging, especially with the narrow sidewalks. I think during certain times of the day, it's a little easy to go out where there's less crowds or kind of off times, maybe earlier in the morning. But definitely on the inside, staying indoors, there's a lot of resources that everyone has. At Yoga Tree, we actually offer free IG live classes, twice a day. And it's not just yoga classes, but there are, HIIT classes or strengthening classes that are offered on Facebook or on IG, even on YouTube, that you can follow, that you can do. And you just need, the space of your mat. For weights, I was telling some of my students, grab some of those things from your reserve pantry, take up those cans of soups and use them as weights, right? So you can be creative of what you do inside, and definitely just staying active just to keep the juices going and the activity level high, so that you're not, stuck to a chair.
Thank you. One of our listeners has asked or has mentioned that they're not feeling like they're particularly in good shape right now. Do you have any recommendations for how to get started if you feel like you're starting from zero?
I think just simple stretching, simple movement. I mean, you're not going to go from day one getting off the couch to a triathlon, marathon runner. And I think just recognizing that it is a long journey, and you're taking it small steps at a time. Even just simple joint movements. I've worked privately with individuals recovering from surgeries, and just different joint movements and like getting the arms to move, and simple things that you can do to get that circulation going. In terms of having a goal, as in I have to be able to do a sit up or a push up. Having more simple goals in terms of like, I just need to walk for 5 minutes, I need to walk for 10 minutes, and having trackable goals that you can see. And when you have that success in that progression of those little, those little milestones,
Yeah.
you start to gain that momentum and that confidence. And over time, you might start adding more. But definitely think of it as this is for you. It's not being compared to anything else. And I think that's the important part.
That's a really good tip, that it is for you. So if a viewer has had some back injuries in the past, or perhaps a condition that impacts their ability to participate fully, do you have any recommendations for how to, if maybe they're not feeling, so somebody that's got an injury, what's the best way for them to participate in a physical way?
Definitely, there's certain, in perspective of yoga, before I start a class, I would always ask, what are some injuries in the room, or what are some aches and pains that you're experiencing? And in terms of yoga, we use yoga poses to help the body feel better. So for instance, if you're experiencing sciatica is often caused by a tight muscle of the piriformis that presses on that nerve, which causes that shooting pain down your leg or up your spine. And by doing a simple stretch, you can open up that piriformis to give the nerve some space so that you're not getting that sharp stabbing feeling. So in the sense of, some people might be thinking, oh, I have this injury, I need to avoid all movement, or I'm just going to wait till my injury gets better. Definitely some movement is better than no movement. So I'm not saying I tore my hamstring and immediately go touch your toes, but I tore my hamstring, I still want to keep it moving so that the blood circulation there can help the healing process, but also strengthening the structures around that injury. So I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that I tore my pec minor. And even though I thought it was an injury just here, it actually affected my shoulder because all the other muscles were compensating for this one injury. So all those other muscles were overworked. They were getting super tight. So in the perspective of yoga, we are looking at, finding that balance again, reopening that space so that the shoulder isn't pulled forward, but also strengthening the back muscle so that the shoulder can stay back there without being overpowered by the chest muscles. So finding that balance between the front body and the back body, but definitely taking a look at how we can minimize injuring further and supporting oneself to get better.
Thank you. I'm loving listening to you talk because it's making me sit up straight and think about putting my shoulders back and all the things that you're supposed to be doing. So, Jason, I've got a couple other questions I wouldn't mind asking you.
Sure.
And some of them you've answered a little bit, but maybe we can expand on them a little bit more. Some people are feeling quite a bit more sedentary during this quarantine than maybe they have in years or ever in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have tips for staying active at home?
Definitely having some sort of schedule. I think schedules help immensely. We talked about the sleep schedule, waking up and sleeping at a certain time, eating at a specific time as well too, so that your body knows what to expect. But scheduling in that movement time, and it doesn't have to be something super formal. It could be, I'm going to walk to my living room, to my kitchen, 5 times just to get the blood flowing. But staying active online, I think for me would be the easiest. And staying connected. I mean, having that fitness buddy, hey, we're going to do this YouTube video together, and having that FaceTime to see someone else being active with you. You can, feel connected, and you can also be active at the same time. I just thought of something, but for our family, because we have 2 young kids, 7 and 9. He actually just turned 9 2 days ago. But for our family activity, because I'm trying to find ways to keep our 2 kids active as well, but we've started picking up some TikTok videos, and we let them pick the song, their favorite song, something that is, capable physically for them as well, and physically for me as well. I'm not as coordinated as everyone thinks. But just finding a video that we can all do and dance is physical. It's fun. We're staying connected. We're being active together. And then that video gets sent to, it's not for Instagram, it's not for the gram, but it's for grandma. Um, and grandma gets to see the grandkids as well too. And, it's kind of encouraged my mom, my grandma, the grandma to actually, maybe mimic some of the moves as well too. So being physically active and being connected to that community can have a viral effect. When your friends see you being active or you see your friends active, you kind of have that snowball effect too. So definitely encourage you to connect more online. And again, it's for yourself, but also, connecting at the same time.
That's awesome. One of the listeners had a question about, first of all, I want to just step back a little bit and reiterate that you mentioned that you have, that Yoga Tree has classes available on Instagram, did you say?
Correct. So for the Instagram users, twice a day, 12 and 4, and the schedule does change slightly from week to week. But when you see our logo light up, so on Instagram, there'll be a circle with a little play button, and you could click on that, and you can see our live teacher teaching the class, and you can type in questions, you can wave, you can send your likes, and the teacher will see that as the class is going on. So that's why it's live, and you can follow along. I know on the phone screen it's a little small, but for some Apple users, you can AirPlay that to your TV. For the Android users, you can Chromecast that to your TV as well, so you can blow that up. And it's just a simple way. And even if you don't make it for that live session, the beauty of it is it's archived for 24 hours. So a lot of healthcare workers were messaging us and saying, I get off at odd times because I work night shift, and I need something to stay active. And you can go back to our archive story and you can see that live class for 24 hours.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and we also have like longer classes on our on-demand platform as well too, also on our IGTV. So we're trying to find ways to kind of reconnect all our students and stay connected during this difficult time, encouraging movement wherever we can. And I think those IG live classes definitely has been helping.
Yeah, I should think so. Can you tell me, Jason, are there any restorative yoga sessions also on your Instagram feed?
We do. So every week we release the schedule, I would say Friday, Saturday for the next week. And we have gentle hatha classes. There are meditation classes as well on our IGTV. So it's something very varied, something for all age groups. At Yoga Tree, we have the ability to offer an assortment and a spectrum of types of yoga, ranging from more meditative, more gentle stretching to something very active in terms of you're going to be dripping in sweat, you're going to be huffing and puffing by the end of the class, and catering to our community. We've tried to reflect that on the IG schedule as well too.
That's wonderful. That's great that you've been able to pivot during this strange moment in history.
It's been a learning
clients and yeah.
I mean, my living room right now is set up as a filming studio. So I teach private Zoom classes as well too. So I see my students on a projector screen, so I can see, the students' little squares, and I can say, hey, Betty, move your right foot forward a little bit. Your knee's not at 90, and then they can see me from the side view. So we have been pivoting and just learning how to take something such as a personal experience, what a yoga class would be, and trying to translate that in a digital realm. And I think it's working. Everyone's kind of slowly adapting to this, and it's just kind of become a little bit of a new norm. Yeah.
The fact that you can see your participants and make recommendations if they're not, doing the pose correctly, I think that's actually really helpful, because the worst thing would be for people to be just, Yeah,
I think that's the difference between the live IG classes versus like the private Zoom classes or the webinar classes. There is that two-way interaction. I think one of the things that I miss as a yoga teacher is being able to see, someone with a low back pain, that's how they move in a particular pose. And when I recognize that in another student, when I see, that person's moving like my other student that has low back pain. Maybe the next pose is going to help them with their low back pain. So one of those, that two-way interaction is something that I really miss as a yoga teacher. But with the Zoom classes, you kind of get a little bit of that back. It's not the same.
For people that aren't on Instagram, Jason, do you have classes that are accessible from the website?
We do have our yoga on demand platform, and it's almost like a Netflix for yoga classes. And you can sign up for those classes on our website, yogatree.ca. Or there's the option of the live classes as well. So we really have three from, in the studio, we kind of pivoted to three separate digital formats for people that are looking for different things. So yeah, definitely check that out, see if that works for you. But there's something for everyone, I would say. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question about snacking now, because I think snacking has become, I think maybe many of us are doing too much of it. Maybe I'm only talking for myself.
Yeah.
But while we're under quarantine, it's so easy to snack and eat more food than you may normally have. Do you have any tips for helping people with those kinds of cravings?
You've definitely hit a hot topic. Snacking and Netflix, I think, are the two most, default actions you can have during a self-quarantine. But as I mentioned before, eating at regular times or eating smaller meals throughout the day also really help with those snack cravings. And even if you really want that crunch from a chip, or maybe that saltiness from a chip, or whatever it is, maybe trying to switch up some of those alternatives. So celery and peanut butter is my go-to. Someone suggested peanut butter and carrots, which I haven't tried, but you guys can definitely try that out and let me know. But there are definitely better alternatives than just the bag of chips, and just keeping alternatives there. And sometimes even prepping your food ahead of time, or prepping those snacks ahead of time, because chips are your default because they come pre-packaged in a bag you open and you stick your hand in and it's, away you go. But
plus you can choose flavors, Jason.
Yes, but you can also add your seasoning and your spicing to your healthy snacks as well too. So if you had those pre-made in baggies in the fridge, that definitely takes away the convenience factor. I think the convenience factor is what makes snacking sometimes, a little bit more difficult for individuals, especially when you're craving that popcorn or whatnot.
So we've got a question here. Since there are so many different types of yoga, how can I find out what the different ones are without actually having to go to all the different classes to find out which one works for me?
So on our homepage, yogatree.ca, if you scroll a little bit to the middle of the homepage, there's a little bit of a survey. So you can click, I want to relax, or I like the sweat. And if you click on that, it kind of populates a few different options of class styles for you. But just to summarize it, if you're looking for something more gentle, something more meditative, definitely look into yin yoga, restorative yoga, meditation. Those tend to be more mentally based, less physically based, right? So we always have those two. Or there's some previews that we have on IGTV as well too, where I announce the type of yoga and you can kind of preview that way. Or if you wanted to do something a little bit more active, I would say Hatha Flow, Vinyasa Flows definitely gets the heart pumping. For me, my favorite is actually hot yoga and reduced heat yoga, where we're in a warmer room. You're sweating right off the bat. But for me, I actually like to run as well too. So for me, the heated types of yoga, there's that added cardio component.
Right.
That kind of is one of the things that I love about physical fitness as well too. And for me, that's my go-to. But for someone else, it could be on the other end of the spectrum, which is restorative and yin.
Thank you. One of the listeners has asked if you can recommend any yoga for an individual that might be in a wheelchair.
Yes, chair yoga. You can do yoga in a chair, and I don't know if you can see my chair, but you can do gentle twists, using your armrest to twist. I know a lot of people sitting for long periods of time your low back starts to hurt. So if you just take, maybe everyone can take a break, but cross your right ankle over your left thigh and just, create like a triangle with the legs. Your left foot is on the floor, your right ankle is on your thigh. And then from here, just take your hands on your desk and gently push your chair away from the desk as you fold forward. And you start to feel something lengthening along the outside of your right glutes, outside of your right hip. And that actually just helps to open up that piriformis, which we talked about, that contributes to sciatic pain. But it also helps to lengthen out your lower back as well too. You could also lift your knee up and add the twist that way. Definitely doing some arm stretches, especially for those of you that are typing a lot. Eagle arms is really great. So if you open your arms in a position and just take your right arm under your left and then see if you can clap your hands together with your thumbs to the nose. There you go. And then fingers straight up. And then just reach your elbow forward and up or forward and down. And you're going to feel either the upper part of your rhomboids open up or the lower part of your rhomboids opening up. And it really depends on where you're tightening your shoulders. You can play with those arms, and you can even add variations such as, turning your arms out to the side a little bit or to the opposite side. And you start to warm up the muscles around the rotators. And you already start to feel energized that way. But definitely there's a lot of things that you can do, even sitting at your office chair, you're in a chair, and stay active that way. So do what you can. I think that's what it is. Even just gentle neck stretches every, half an hour between your breaks, just to keep the muscles and the range of motion fluid. Yeah.
It feels really good already.
Wish I had more time. I could definitely lead a full class,
Maybe next time. Maybe next time. Well, I think with that, we will draw to a conclusion. I'm really pleased that so many people sent questions in that I was able to ask you directly, Jason. You did a great job of providing wonderful information about that. I think probably everybody that's listening is going to be interested to check out Yoga Tree on Instagram and go to your website and find out the different things that you offer. I want to thank you very much for bringing your expertise to this forum for us to help us think about how to get ourselves in the healthiest place that we can be. Hi, Debbie, you're back. I want to thank you for that, for what you've brought to everybody. And I also want to remind our listeners that following this series, this is a 3-part series. This is part number 1. Which will conclude Tuesday, a week from now. We'll be sending out a survey that we would like your input about what you liked and what we can make better and what kinds of topics we can provide to our alumni community to help us all stay engaged and connected during this time. Our next one is going to be on Thursday, and that's going to feature alumnus Danielle Ryan, who's also a Bachelor of Environmental Science grad. And she's going to talk about productivity and creativity. So, I love the Waterloo mug. Yeah. Perfect. So once again, I just want to thank you from the bottom of our heart for bringing what you have to the alumni community. We're so happy to see you and to be able to feature you in this way. If anybody has any further questions, I would invite them to put them into the Q&A, and we'll keep the conversation going after the webinar ends, and make sure that Jason and Debbie can respond to those. So
thank you again for having us.
You're so welcome. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to do some stretches now.
Everyone, take care.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.